Well, good evening, everyone, and I would like to welcome you and call to order our council meeting for Tuesday, June the 1st. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest? So I spent a good part of the weekend reflecting on the news Friday about the 215 lost but now found Indigenous children. I'm sure, like me, you were shocked, saddened, burdened, and yes, even angry. This discovery serves as a reminder that we cannot hide from a painful and horrifying past. We must acknowledge the pain and suffering that we as a nation have caused to generations of Indigenous communities. What is troubling is this did not happen hundreds of years ago. This happened in our lifetime. In no uncertain terms, we as a nation have played a role in this genocide. In order to move forward in reconciliation, we must acknowledge our role and as a nation, grieve the lives we lost and the lives that we have changed for the worst. So I ask, if you haven't already, grieve. Remember and honor in your own personal reflections the 215 little lives that have been lost. Acknowledge what has happened and be part of a better future. While we cannot undo the past, we can be part of a present and future where we do better. Please join me in a moment of silent reflection as we honor the lost 215 lives. Thank you. Before we get into the business of our agenda, I wanted to share with everyone an email that I received over the weekend. And I will also let you know that a signed copy was received by our clerk's office. It was addressed to me and to the attention of the clerk. It is with deep regret that I provide you with my notice of my resignation as councillor for the municipality of Lucan Biddulph, effective immediately. I have valued my time as councillor for the residents of Ward 2, and I believe that I've represented those residents to the best of my abilities. As per my election platform, I committed significant time and effort to improve accountability, transparency, and integrity within the municipality, and there remains much work to be done. However, personal circumstances require my attention at this time, and I don't believe that I can continue to serve on council and dedicate the same level of effort or to a level that residents deserve. And it was signed, Councillor Peter Masterakis. I've been in touch with Councillor Masterakis, and I've wished him best as he works through his personal situation. And I did offer him, on behalf of council, staff, and the residents of Lucan Biddulph, our thanks for his service to our community. And Ron will address the process that we will follow in filling the vacant position when it's his turn for his staff report. So we do have to go into a public meeting, and of course this is a drainage public meeting. So Tina, do I need a motion to move into this public meeting? It's just a motion to go into the Court of Revision, right?
That's correct.
Okay, perfect. So no motion to open up the public meeting. So joining us tonight, of course, is Mike DeVos from Sprate Associates. And I'd like to turn it over to you, Mike, to walk us through the addendum report at this time.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, the addendum report itself was prepared in accordance with Section 78 and Section 4 of the Drainage Act. After the submission of the Blake Drain report, there was a new petition submitted and as well a request to add some work to the Blake Drain project. There was a petition to replace a private tile that we had been partially replacing with a berm, a wascob berm on branch A, and that went up into the Vandenberg properties towards the Dietrich property in concession 8. And so this report does recommend replacing the tile for its entire length across the Vandenberg property with a catch basin at the Dietrich fence line. And it would be 8-inch and 10-inch diameter tile, and it would be referred to as a separate branch K. So it is altering some of the work and adding some new work there. As well, the upper portion of the watershed on branch A did not originally have wascob berms on them proposed. The landowners in that area were going to be doing them themselves privately, but they had since changed their mind and requested through the request to have the berms constructed through the report under the Drainage Act. So we have added 18 berms in the upper reaches of branch A. There were already berms being proposed on branches D and E in the southerly portion of the watershed, so nothing was being added there. It's just the northerly portion. So the report itself deals with this north part of the watershed, and because the work was not included in the original report, we did have to submit a separate report being referred to as the addendum, which does need a separate consideration meeting, separate quarter revision, and a separate bylaw to go along with it. The construction and the tendering and all that, it could be all combined if the timing works, but it does need independent bylaws.
Okay.
I stopped to open up to questions.
Okay, thank you for that, Mike. Any questions on the addendum report from council? Okay, now I know that we do have a couple of members of the public that have asked to join. Just wondering if there was any comments about the addendum report from Mr. and Mrs. Vandenberg. Just a reminder, you're muted. So if you wanted to say something, just unmute yourself, but I'll give you a couple more seconds.
No questions on this moment.
Okay, all right, thank you. And I believe Mr. Cassidy is speaking to the next motion, but Mr. Cassidy, did you have any comments on the addendum report?
Nope.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so with that, we do have a recommended motion that the addendum drainage report for the Blake Drain 2021, as prepared by Spreet Associates dated May 14th, 2021, be received and adopted. If I can get a mover and a seconder for that, please. Councillor Westman and Deputy Mayor Manders. All in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. So our next item of business is, of course, to enter into the Court of Revision. The motion in front of you is that council adjourn its regular meeting in order to sit as the Court of Revision under the Drainage Act to consider the Blake Drain 2021, and that Mayor Kathy Burkhart-Justin be appointed as chair. If I can get a mover and a seconder for that one, please. Councillor Regan and Councillor Westman. All in favor? And that's carried. And so now we are sitting as the Court of Revision. And at this time, I will again turn it over to Mr. DeVos. Mike?
Yes, the court typically deals with appeals. The process would be to submit an appeal in writing 10 days in advance. If there is none, then the court could choose to make a motion to hear verbal appeals or appeals in person if they wish. So that's the process now. And I believe, if I'm correct, there were no appeals submitted in writing.
Jeff?
Yeah, Madam Mayor. So we did have one, Mr. Cassidy did contact the township and wished to put an appeal in. It was not within the 10 days, but I asked him to put together his appeal and that he could bring it forward to at this time for the court to decide whether they want to hear it and continue with it or not.
Okay, thank you very much. So I guess the question to the court is there, are you willing to hear the appeal? I guess maybe before I open that up, just to clarify, Mike, there is opportunity in a normal court or a court of revision. This is the normal court of revision, to open it up to verbal appeals. There's that opportunity.
Yes, the court would have to make a separate motion and have that motion passed to be able to accept a verbal appeal.
Okay, so I'm looking to the court as to whether or not that is a motion that you're interested in. Any discussion around that to open it up to essentially verbal appeals and I guess accepting the appeal that was presented after the 10-day period. Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, because my understanding is that the written appeal didn't meet the parameters, but if Mike's saying that it is the that it's normal course of action to allow a person to speak and to make that motion, if that is typical of the Samuel's, online here, I certainly would entertain hearing what Samuel has to say. I certainly was not interested in accepting it, a late written appeal.
Okay. Any other discussion on that? Councillor Reagan.
Yeah, I agree with Deputy Mayor. I don't want to hear the written appeal that's late. And I'm just thinking, I don't want to get into the habit of doing that, quite frankly. I don't think we should. So, but the verbal appeal, I would support that.
Okay. All right, then I would look for a motion from someone to allow for a verbal appeal to be presented. Deputy Mayor Manders, Councillor Reagan. All in favor? And that's carried. Okay, Mr. Cassidy, the floor would be yours.
All right, sure. Thanks. I have 7 points here, so I'll raise them one by one. The first one's regarding notice. So council approved the proposed drain at the special council meeting Monday, April 12th, 2021. I was only notified of this meeting Thursday, April 8th, before the meeting, and the meeting was held at 9 a.m. Thankfully, I am currently work from home and was able to adjust my work schedule so I could attend, but many could likely not. Despite such late notice, low attendance, and very brief information being shared about the project, council approved 1, 2, and 3rd reading at the initial meeting, despite concerns raised. So I feel like late notice was given and not much information was given, and so it would be helpful if information was shared in advance so that people could collect their thoughts and then raise any concerns they have.
Okay. Was that it, or did you have more?
Yeah, so that's point number 1. So point number 2, regarding the project approval. So this project was initiated by, in my understanding, a few farms who will have economic benefit from the project. Residential stakeholders in the area won't receive any benefit, and to my knowledge, haven't been given any real opportunities to prevent the project from being approved. And to me, that's not a democratic process. So I don't understand how a minority of stakeholders can push through a project without there being a vote or some sort of democratic process and equal representation from stakeholders. Point number 3 is regarding the engineer's rationale. And with all due respect to Mike, Mike has been great throughout the process, but in the project proposal report, the engineer notes that the current drain is in fine working condition. And for residential stakeholders, the existing drain meets our needs. So if the farms who requested the drain want the drain and it'll provide economic benefit, I see no reason why they wouldn't be willing to pay for it. So I think residential stakeholders should be given an opportunity to opt out of the project or should be assessed significantly less. Number 4 is regarding the engineer's conflict of interest. So the need or approval of the rationale for the project is apparently at the discretion of the engineer. The engineer, however, created the report and is in the business of essentially profiting from the creation of such reports. So in my opinion, the engineer is therefore in a strong position of conflict of interest. And so there should be a separate assessment by an independent engineer. The 5th report is regarding timing. So again, there will be economic benefits from the farms that have requested this drain. And for the residential stakeholders, there won't be. And right now we're in the position of being in a global pandemic. And I question if a drain that is in fine working condition is a top priority and is something that should be imposed on residential stakeholders who might be financially struggling. To me, that does not make sense at all. So I think that the drain should be deferred until the pandemic is over. Next, in terms of the project assessment, essentially what I've been made to understand is that benefit is factored into the assessment, but it's so essentially a discount is given or a larger proportion of the drain is calculated if you receive benefit. If you don't receive any benefit, then you receive a discount. But in my opinion, the discount received is irrelevant because the value of the project is 0. So any discount on a 0% value is still 0. Lastly, in terms of my assessment and Dean Vandermolen's assessment, who I included in this petition or request to be heard. So most stakeholders in our area, the residential stakeholders, will see very little cost. They have very small residential properties. And so they're likely not going to put up much of a fuss, essentially. The farms in the area, on the other hand, will receive economic benefit. They're the ones who petitioned for the drain. So obviously they're not going to complain at all. This is what they want. So this essentially leaves me and Dean and maybe some others, I'm not sure, with significant sums of cost to pay in relation to the rest of the stakeholders receiving no benefit. So I would recommend, therefore, that there be a third criteria, essentially, for acreages that are non-agricultural to be assessed. And that's it. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for that, Mr. Cassidy. Just to be clear, are you speaking on behalf of Mr. Vandermolen?
Yeah, that's right.
And he's aware of that? You're speaking on his behalf?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. So I guess Mr. Cassidy has laid out a number of issues in his appeal. I don't know, Mike, if there's a couple, or Jeff. Some of them are process related. If one of you wants to tackle some of that for clarification for the court. Jeff?
Before Mike goes, because Mike will talk about the drainage stuff. Before we get started there, I did get an email from Dane Vandermolen that although he supports lower assessments on residential property, that he did not put his name, did not want his name on the appeal. He supports lower assessment, but he did not want his name put on the assessment or on the appeal. Secondly, the court, one of the main goals here on the appeal is about the assessment itself, not the process. So upon that, I'll turn that over to Mike so he can talk about that.
Okay, thank you for reminding us it's on the assessment. Thanks, Jeff. Mike?
Yes, I guess I would ask the court, I mean, there were a few different items that are not assessment related, and I could keep my responses strictly to the assessments or provide some additional comment if the court wishes me to. And I guess I would ask the court if they wish me to comment or keep my comments strictly to the assessment.
As chair of the court, I would say keep it to the assessment, since that's what we're here for.
Okay, yes, the assessment complaint, or the appeal in this case, indicated that there was no discount provided for the residential properties, and that the value of the project for them was zero. As under the Drainage Act, we have specific instruction as the engineer on how to assess these projects. And as I indicated to the appellant, that the first component, or the first task at hand, is to remove any special assessments under the Drainage Act. There is what's called Section 26, which indicates any road, railway, or utility that has caused increased cost to the project by their existence has to pay that increase in cost. And we have to calculate that separately, so that's done first. Once we've extracted any of those special assessments, then the Act instructs us to assess benefit. And benefit is defined in the Drainage Act. It's defined as better control of surface water, better control of subsurface water, increased land value, increased crop production, better aesthetics. There's a list of things in there that require us to separate out those properties that receive benefit and charge that benefit. And if you are not close to this project, because of the topography is fairly hilly, or it's not that flat in comparison to other areas, if you're not close to the work, you're not going to be charged benefit. And in the case of the Cassidy property, they are not close and they are not being charged any benefit. So the outlet assessments were to basically to those residential properties that were being referred to. So again, that benefit is not being charged, it's only outlet. And under the Drainage Act, it specifically instructs the engineer to charge all properties that are liable to pay assessment, which means if they have water that would leave their property and get into the drain, either now or in the future, under the way that it's been designed, that those properties would have to pay outlet. And outlet is instructed to be assessed as the volume of water that is generated by each property that uses the drain. So specifically speaking, I can't say that there's a zero value to the project for a certain group of owners. We look at the project as a whole, assess each part of the assessment separately as directed under the Drainage Act. And unfortunately, there is outlet costs to individual properties. And in this case, the residential properties themselves are tributary to this drain. I can say that most of the residential properties did not exist in the original time of the report. So in 1980 or 81, when the drain was originally constructed through the Drainage Act, most of those residential properties didn't exist, and they've been added since. And to say that the drain is working fine and it's an existing condition, that's true, but it is undersized in accordance with today's design standards. And those design standards take into consideration the fact that you do have changes in the landscape. And part of those changes in the landscape is drainage on farms, but it's also improvements to roads, the creation of residential lots. So all those things are part and parcel. So we don't have the ability as the engineer to say we are not going to assess groups of properties. Everybody is liable to contribute their fair share. For this particular project, we assess a certain amount of benefit as a proportion of the cost. Those benefits are charged out, and then the remainder gets distributed as outlet to all of the upstream lands that are tributary. As far as the Cedc property goes, residential properties typically are viewed to have a bit higher runoff than what a farmer's field would, because they have a larger proportion of harder surface. So the proportion of roof and road and laneway, driveway, hard surfaces is larger in comparison to what a farmer's field would be. A road is significantly higher than that. So we take the standard of what a farmer's field would be and factor any area up for their land use. Small residential property would have a factor of 2, and a larger residential property like the Cedc property would have a factor of 1.2. So about 20% above what a farmer's field would. So those things are factored up and down. A road, for instance, Roman line in this case, has a factor of 3.4. So the gravel and the road ditching make the water run off faster from that particular area. And you take the total, and what I can do is, if I can share my screen now, possibly I can show you a spreadsheet, which is part of our calculation. Can the court see these numbers here?
Yeah.
So this is saying that, for instance, on branches D and J, which is a portion of the drain that the Cedc property is tributary to, there was $76,000 in outlet costs, which had to be distributed over the watershed. And this is a list of all the properties, and those that are not tributary don't have any areas. And then we have the adjustments for runoff here, which shows all the land use adjustments. The other adjustment is for location. So you pay under the Drainage Act, you only have to contribute assessment for the portion of the drain that you use. And if you're at the very top of the drain, your area will use 100% of it. If you're at the bottom of the drain, your water will use significantly less. So you take a factor for the location. So you take the 76 and you divide it out amongst the properties and roads. So in this case, the Cunningham property on the west side of Roman line has an outlet charge of $28,150. Fran's Livestock on the west side of the road is $13,109. Kelly, which is a residential property on the west side of $1,119. The Roman Catholic Church St. Patrick's property is $1,692. There are some residential lots in the range of 100, 5772, 129. And when you come to the Cedc property, it is $975. So that's part of that total assessment. Each component of the drain has to be broken down into its individual assessments, because certain parts of the project only apply to certain groups of owners. So this was for branch D and J. There are other spreadsheets for branch D. And then we have branch A and D outlet. So there's a bunch of different components that are all individually assessed. So we look at each one independently and we assess them in accordance with the instructions under the Drainage Act. I don't have the ability to say that the properties should not be assessed, and that is not done. I've never had that particular situation asked of me or instructed to me by a drainage tribunal. So that would be my response.
Okay, thank you for that, Mike. I would take any questions from the court at this time. Councillor Regan.
Madam Mayor, if I may, I just want to ask a question of Mike, if I could, please. Just what's the ratio of agricultural to residential? I'm going through the list here, but I figure you would know quicker than me looking through the list. So, sorry, go ahead.
So as far as outlet is concerned, a farmer's field has a runoff factor of 1. So that's the standard. If it is a bush lot or it has treat areas that don't have any subsurface drainage or it has vegetation that retains water, it would be lower than 1. Residential properties, depending upon their size, range from 2 to about 1.2. So because the Cassidy property is a larger property that's residential, it has a runoff factor of 1.2. Whereas a small residential property would have a runoff factor of 2, and a road is anywhere between 3 and 4.5.
I got it. Okay, thanks. Thank you. Thanks.
Okay. Any other questions from the court? Okay, I guess the question would be to the court about consideration for the appeal. There is of course, a recommended motion that we adopt the drainage assessment schedule as presented, but that would be up to the court if there is interest in taking the appeal into factor. Deputy Mayor.
I don't have interest in taking the appeal into factor. I was going to suggest I make that motion if I do get a seconder or not.
The recommended motion to
Yes.
adopt the drainage assessment schedule as
Yes.
submitted. Okay, you make that motion
Yes.
and a seconder for that. Councillor Regan. And is there any other further discussion? All in favor? And that's carried. So just for clarification of process for Mr. Cassidy, again, I don't know if Jeff wants to take this or Mike, but he can still appeal this, right? He has 21 days to appeal this, and he can do it, I believe, through the tribunal through OMAFRA.
That's correct. An appellant to the Court of Revision, if an appeal is heard by a court, there would be 21 days to file an appeal to the Drainage Tribunal.
Okay, all right. So that might be of interest to Mr. Cassidy. Okay, well, we're done with the Court of Revision. Thank you very much for joining us, Mike. And at this time, I would ask for a motion to close the Court of Revision at 6:34 in order to reconvene our regular council meeting. A mover and seconder, please. Deputy Mayor and Councillor Regan. All in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. So we are now sitting, thanks Mike for joining us. We're now sitting as regular council. We do have 2 delegations and presentations with us this evening. I don't know, Lisa, are they just coming in? Okay. There they are. So our first delegation, it's a team presentation. Constable Aaron Mosher from the Middlesex OPP is joining us, as well as Detachment Coordinator for the Middlesex County OPP, Dean Croker. But we're going to hear from Aaron first. And I think that you will all be very interested in her presentation. It's a program that I'm extremely supportive and excited about. And before I have her unmic herself, I do want to congratulate her and her partner, Melanie Corby, on being the CMHA Champion of Mental Health winner that was presented about a month ago now, I think, maybe even 6 weeks. Time goes so fast, right? And it was, their award was through CMHA, and it was presented to them at the Breakfast of Champions at St. Joe's. And I was just thrilled when you guys were announced as the winner, and it's well deserved. And I'm just happy that you're here tonight to share more of the program that you and Melanie are responsible for. So over to you, Erin.
Thank you so much for the introduction. Again, that award is certainly something that we share between all the agencies involved, as everybody had had a lot of input in the MCERT program, so the Mobile Crisis Rapid Response Team. It's been up and running since November, and as you had said, my partner Melanie Corby and I are we're both in the mental health liaison role with Middlesex OPP. I've been in that role since I guess 2017. She was very instrumental in motivating all of the partnering agencies in coming together, and there was an identified need that was happening around that time, that there was a lack of resources in our community. For those living in rural community of Middlesex, those living in the First Nations communities as well. A lot of the mental health resources were identified to be very city-centered, and those facing barriers or challenges in getting into the city were not able to access those resources. So there was a need identified around that time that we'd like to have a program like the Mobile Crisis Rapid Response Team brought together to assist the individuals in our community with mental health or crisis, addictions crisis incidents. Around 2019, for the past 3 years before that, it was identified that there was a 63% increase in mental health occurrences. And that prompted us to pull together a working group, and a relationship between Middlesex OPP, CMHA, and Strathroy Caradoc Police was formed. A business case was put together and presented to the Southwest LHIN. And before we did receive successful funding for that, the agencies did begin a pilot program in 2020, where we had one full-time clinician from CMHA working with our mental health officer and attending those live calls for service. So a number of different models were considered when we thought about putting together the Mobile Crisis Rapid Response Team, but we thought that the best model that would serve those individuals in our community would be one that would have a clinician embedded within our detachment, attend live calls, riding along with officers, and also having a follow-up component built into the model where if the clinician and officer weren't able to attend that call because they were dealing with another incident call for service, that they would be able to follow up afterward and provide supports to those individuals and families experiencing mental health or addictions crisis afterward. So that was the model that we went with and are proceeding with now. The types of different calls that the MCERT team may attend would be those mental health calls involving suicidal ideation, self-harm, those experiencing delusions or paranoia, crisis addictions calls, family disputes with a mental health component, those that might be experiencing postpartum anxiety, or those just struggling with coping and with daily living anxiety and different life stressors. Also, missing lost persons that involve a mental health component, elderly or dementia or Alzheimer's cases as well. And when the MCERT officers and clinician are attending those live calls, what would happen would be they would arrive on scene, attend and assist in de-escalating that crisis, and then conduct a risk assessment with that individual to determine whether they are safe to be left in the community with a good support plan, or whether they do in fact need to be apprehended and brought to hospital for further evaluation. So the benefit of having a clinician at scene would be to destigmatize the experience of that person having contact with police, and increasing those relationships between those in the community that are dealing with those mental health or addictions crisis in the moment. We're providing resources to the mental health resources to those persons immediately, and we're decreasing those unnecessary transports to our emergency departments, and then providing them with those immediate wraparound support services for mental health or addictions as well. The other thing is that we are providing that follow-up component. So if they are kept within the community, we are following up with that individual within 24 to 48 hours, and checking in on them and their families and providing them with those follow-up resources and continuing with that support plan as well. The other benefit to the MCERT program and having them embedded within our detachments as well is that we're providing those supports also to our officers and increasing wellness and morale within the detachment and those officers that are going out and dealing with the mental health calls, that are continuing to increase as we move, especially through this pandemic time. So the relationships are formed, and they are very knowledgeable as well in the resources that we have as far as our agencies as well, and they're able to provide them and connect them with different resources for their loved ones and families and friends as well. So we immediately saw success in the statistics in the first couple of months that we had the program running. I know that Inspector Croker will go into more of the statistics of the program in the recent months, but right initially we saw that OPP MCERT was involved in 186 calls for service just in the first 2 months, and Strathroy Caradoc Police MCERT was involved in 156 calls for service, just to give you an idea there. So this program we are continuing to evaluate. We're continuing to educate our officers and clinicians and taking opportunity to have the program evolve and expand in the future. And as we continue to move through this time, we've already seen some different needs that we think we can expand on in the program as well, especially in relation to the follow-up portion. We're hoping that the need will show that we'll be able to have another clinician and officer dedicated, especially to that follow-up portion, and free up time for another clinician and officer to attend those live calls for service to connect those individuals immediately in need. Any questions on that so far?
Anything from council? Councillor Westman.
First of all, it's really good to see you again, Erin. It's been a long time.
Hi, Alex.
Yeah, great to see you again. I'm really quite impressed with this. This has been a long time coming. I know there's been a big need for it, and I'm glad that you're really getting this done. I know that our first responders in the county are constantly running into situations where they need that extra help, where they need somebody to come in and work with a mental health issue. So that'll certainly lighten the load for them as well. So it's great. Thank you very much.
Go ahead, Erin.
Okay, so just as well to make everyone aware that our Provincial Communication Center, simultaneously at the same time the MCERT program was running out, and being implemented, we were also running a pilot program in our Provincial Communication Center where there's actually a clinician embedded with our dispatchers. So when persons are calling in to 911 and perhaps all they're looking for is some resources or to be connected with some supports, they're diverting those unnecessary calls away from police and connecting those individuals in the community with those resources by connecting them with that clinician right off the get-go as well. The other benefit to that, of course, is that when we are having those live calls for service come in, connecting that clinician with the person immediately on the phone, they're often able to help in that de-escalation of the individual and immediate support and decreasing that stigmatization as well for those persons experiencing crisis in the moment. So they've also seen a lot of great success with that program also. Another great resource in our community that's also continuing to run is the Middlesex Situation Table, in which a number of different agencies in our community are still meeting weekly. We're doing that via Zoom, which is sort of the way forward right now through the pandemic. But it is a resource available to those that are identified to be at elevated risk. So in your capacities, if you're coming across those individuals that you think have sort of been connected, but things aren't working out very well, but they're still presenting as very elevated risk to themselves or others, please reach out to those different community agencies like CMHA or Middlesex OPP, addiction services, and they would likely have somebody sitting on that table that could bring them forward and decrease the risk to help them get connected with supports as well.
That is a great reminder, because I don't know whether or not, I mean, I can say that I'm aware of the situation table, but I don't know whether that is something that is broadly known across the community, that there is that group that gets together. And so that if there is an individual or loved one that, as you say, isn't being directed where he or she should be, that there is a group that gets together that perhaps can push that forward. So maybe we can do a little bit more on our social media side to kind of maybe do a story on that, because I think that's a key piece. Because quite often I know, people, think that they've helped their loved one, but then it seems to stop. And then what do you do? So I'm glad that you brought that situation table up.
Absolutely. And we do have representation from our MCERT team as well, sitting at that table. And so there are about, there's about 18 different agencies that sit on that table weekly. And there may be just one piece missing that, that table might be able to help with. So just reach out to any of the different community agencies and they would be able to bring that forward.
Any other questions or comments for Erin? Just on that program, can you just refresh me, I guess, is it fully funded through the LHINs, or is it a combination of OPP dollars and LHIN dollars?
Fully funded through the LHIN.
And is there a time frame on that? Will you have to continually reapply, or do you think that is you're now in their pipeline?
I think Inspector Croker might be able to answer more on that, but right now that is secured funding. But if we are looking to expand on, the program that we have now, we're continuing to collect data on that, and that would have to be represented. And then Councillor Regan.
No, you go ahead first. I'll wait.
I was just going to say, I was at an event where you shared the statistics with us, with that group. And I don't think it should be lost on anyone that in the first 2 months, the OPP were involved in 186 calls through this program, and Strathroy Caradoc Police, 156 calls. So obviously there's a need, and you're playing a part in addressing that. So Councillor Regan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Aaron, thank you for the presentation. I just very briefly, I just want to say, it's just you just gave us a very good reminder just to watch out for other people, watch out for our neighbors, watch out for our families, and to try to get them to the right people. Thanks. That's all I wanted to say. I just appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions for Aaron? And then we can move on to Inspector Croker. Okay, thanks again, Aaron. Really appreciate you sharing this information, and best of luck as you roll out this program. It is definitely needed in our community, and we do thank you for it. So.
Thank you. We appreciate the feedback as well. So feel free to share if you do get any responses on it.
Absolutely. We're good at that. Okay. And as I said, it's great to have Inspector Jean Croker with us, who is the detachment commander for the Middlesex County OPP. So great to see you, Jean.
Your worship, thanks very much. And council, it's a pleasure to be before you tonight. Aaron, go home. I see you're at the office. Go home.
Will do.
Okay. Everybody heard him.
Feel free to stick. Yeah, I think what I'll do is I've got a couple of things to report on, but I'll just tail into the mental health component that Aaron is just done a great job explaining. For my seat as detachment commander, I couldn't be more proud of this program and the energy and passion that both Melanie and Aaron put into getting it off the ground. It was one of the easiest things I've ever been able to do. Is they had the passion. All I had to say was just do it. And they came back with a successful program after the partnerships were formed. And your worship, to your question, it's permanent funding through the LIN. And Aaron is correct. If we're with the stats that we're collecting, we are seeing that there will be a need for an expansion. We will seek funding with that down the road. But as of right now, with our dedicated clinician for both OPP and for Strathroy, we both have a full-time employee clinician for mental health with us. That's permanently funded through the LIN. The work that Mel and Aaron did with their working group with Canadian Mental Health and Strathroy Caradoc showcased a need that Southwest LIN, as money is tight everywhere, had no hesitation at providing the funds to our community in the county. Because as Aaron said, everything is London-centric when it comes to the resources available. Not everybody can get into London, and this program works out extremely well. I'll touch on a couple of stats. Where we are right now, as for total calls for service, for the Middlesex OPP is 476 mental health calls since this program has started. And that's live calls where the officers are going out with the clinician. Where we've seen, and this is where it's really going to pay off dividends, is the amount of follow-up that the clinician and our officers are doing. Since November, we've had 313 calls have actually been dedicated follow-up calls where we've made initial contact. The person has not been brought into the emergency department. They've been left at home with proper support, as Aaron had described. And the officer and clinician have been going back out to meet with them and ensure that the support's still there, the services, the referrals are coming through. So again, this is kind of, as we think of, rural Ontario, when back in the 1800s, this is the doctor doing the house calls. Now it's we've taken an old idea and brought it forward again, and now we have the experts going to the house to help. Another category that's these stats I'm sharing, that's they actually belong to Canadian Mental Health. We've asked for them to hold on to be the collector of our stats because it's their clinicians. We have our own way of collecting to verify. This way, since they were the ones that went and secured the money, they're going to be responsible for holding on to the stats so that they can go forward. One of the categories that they have is we have follow-ups, live calls, and other individuals served. And these are unique situations. These are the people where in our communities that they're repeat callers. And before this program was well underway, Middlesex County, and it wasn't Lucan Biddulph, but had a community member who unfortunately had the record, a very disturbing record of being the number one I guess, pressure on the 911 system in the province. He called himself, it called 911 more than any other entity in the entire province. So with our policy, that meant that every time a 911 call came in, officers had to go out. And Mel and Aaron in the infancy, or not in the infancy, before this concept was written, they were the ones that were going out and trying to be proactive and bringing him to the situation table. So now that we have that category identified, we're hoping that, again, with proactive work that the group's doing, that these people won't even get into the 911 system. And Aaron then also talked about our the clinician at the communication center. If it's not a police that matter, the police don't even know about it. As Aaron mentioned, it's being diverted, and the mental health clinicians dealing with it inside over the phone and setting up referrals from there. So that's the other bonus is what we've been seeing. And I just have to again praise Aaron and Mel. I couldn't be more prouder of them. But what's really unique about this is they were ahead of the curve on this. In 2020, we saw throughout the US and Canada, the defund the police, those type of events because of mental health and the way that police handled mental health calls. Aaron and Mel had identified this before I became detachment commander in 2018. So they were well ahead of the curve of trying to minimize the police role and help with that stigmatization of mental health. And we are, unfortunately, the 24-hour resource that's always available. But we are not the best trained. Our training has, and I can tell you over my 32 years, where we've gone from mental health training when I came on to where we are, it's night and day. But again, you're not going to beat having a person who that is their full-time job right next to you dealing with it at the time. One of the stats that has just absolutely amazed me with in such a short period of time is actually the calls that we've diverted from the hospital as a result of this. So as we look at trying to stigmatize the mental health being a police matter, we have there was 47 calls that were diverted from hospital. So those people weren't taken to hospital and escorted into the emergency department by 2 police officers. Didn't sit for 3 or 4 hours in a waiting room with everybody staring at them with 2 police officers. Those calls were calls that if we didn't have the clinician, the officers would have taken to hospital based off of the signs that they were presenting. But with the clinician being right there, being able to offer the support and I just want to say, I can't fault the officers for doing it, because again, our responsibilities and limitations under the Mental Health Act are it's a very narrow scope. Either we have to be 100% confident that nothing's going to happen, and that's a lot of liability and onus to put on the officers who don't have the training that our social workers and mental health workers have, versus taking some of the hospital to have them cleared by a physician. So looking at the average, that's, as I said, there's 46 calls where we haven't had to take people into the emergency department. They're staying at home, getting the service. At the end of the day, our community is getting better that way. But as an emergency response group, I can let you know that the average wait time in an emergency department is 3 hours for a mental health call. With 2 officers, that's 138 hours on average for each officer, which then works out to 11 days of police work that's spent per officer. So 22 working days that the officers are not on the road. So now we've reinvested that back into our community. So that's not the highlight of this. It is actually the community that's benefiting. But from a standpoint of keeping our cruisers in your communities, that is a positive spin-off from that. So I can't really touch much more than what Erin's done. She's done a great job with the program. What we have done is just to kind of alleviate. Erin's a very busy person. She's my go-to person. So her plate's very full. So we're getting her some help. So we've actually identified an officer who's going to kind of take the mental health component away from Erin. She's no doubt going to be there as a crutch, because you can't lose that experience. And so we're going to have a dedicated officer who's going to be working with clinicians just to solidify that partnership. What we had been doing since November is having officers from the different platoons ride with them. And that was done by design at first so that the officers can get to see how the expert works. Because right now the analytics of our calls are, most of them are Monday to Friday and during somewhat of a daytime hour from, I think it's like 11 to 7 is our peak. So we have them working just right now from 8 till 4, still capturing most of the calls that come in. And with the dedicated officer coming in, we're going to maybe look at jigging those hours a little bit to have them reflect, but having the officers rotate through when the clinician's not working, or it is a nighttime when our calls come in. They've been exposed to that expert, and it's no different than working with a skilled carpenter. You pick up tricks of the trade. You see what works and what doesn't work, and the officers are able to bring that with them and share it with their platoon. So it's a win-win for everybody, and the biggest winners are our communities and the members in crisis. So that's yeah. At the end of the day, it's an amazing to see this come to fruition. So I'll take a break there, and if anybody has any questions or any follow up on that.
Great. All right. Thanks for more of the background, sharing more of that. Yeah, the statistics shared, and it's amazing. You don't think about the ripple effect of how this sort of program, the diversion and that sort of thing, what it can mean, boots on the ground sort of thing. Any questions on this for Inspector Croker at the moment? Nope. Okay.
All right, well then I guess I can, I'll just go into the other report that I have. And it's just wrapping up. When I met with your council last year, I'd covered some policing stats for the first 3 quarters, almost 3 quarters of the, excuse me, of the year. So, excuse me. So I'll just go over from August until December of 2020, just comparing the last part of last year. What you see before you is our main categories for collecting statistics for billing models and for what's called UCR, which is Uniform Crime Reporting, where all police forces have the same reporting system so that the federal government is able to keep an accurate kind of trend as to what's going on in policing, in the policing world across Canada. So looking at these stats, we've seen it's actually positive numbers all the way around. From 2019 to 2020, there's been a decrease in every category in Lucan Biddulph except for one, and it's the operational category. And I'll explain that one in a minute. But when we start at the very top, we look at the violent crime from August to December of both years, you're down 10 calls. Property crime down from 41 to 17. Other criminal code matters. This is a lot of this stuff is court-related matters such as bail violations, though it's more administrative, and that was down. Drug possession stayed the same with 2 in that same period of time, but one additional charge during 2020 versus 2019. Statutes and the acts. This is all kind of provincial matters, and it does capture mental health calls. And it's where other communities in Middlesex actually had a rise during this period of time with this because of mental health calls. Fortunate enough to say Lucan Biddulph had a decrease. The operational one is where we see an increase. And the 2 main categories that pushed it up from 93 to 121 was noise complaints and domestic disputes, COVID related. Everybody's being stuck at home. So it's, excuse me. These numbers are consistent across the county where we've seen an increase, unfortunately, and not all the domestics are, they're family disturbances. They're what we call non-criminal code domestics, where they're just arguments, and unfortunately there has been also the assault of domestics that fall in there as well. But yeah, that is something I think if I spoke with any of my counterparts in the OPP for the same time period, that we would see an increase in these throughout the year. Operational 2 is this deals with the big, where we see a big decrease in numbers here is alarms and 911 hangups. So I think the alarms, again, with 2020, with a lot of people being at home, alarms weren't being used. It's just people were at home. So that the false alarms that we get during the day, and then again, that's the property crime would be a relation to that as well, with people being at home. Houses were not, residential properties were not a target an easy target as they have been in the past, when people are typically working during the day and homes are left empty. And then I'll talk a little bit about the traffic specifically in a minute with the number of accidents that occurred. But if you look overall from the year to date from 2019 to 2020, went from 586 to 515 calls in these areas for Lucan. And then from in that same time period, August to December, 241 to 198. So your hours of police involvement in these categories was reduced by almost 400 hours over that over the comparison of years from 19 to 20. Any questions on that?
I got a question. It's Dave. If I could.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just on the false alarms, is that like throughout the years, is there a bill back to those addresses, or do we collect any revenue on paying for the services, or are we doing anything are we not doing anything we should do, or how does that work on false alarms if it's a repeat?
Yeah, unfortunately, the OPP, I know some police services across the province do have, it's essentially, well, it varies from agency to agency that has a program. Sometimes it's a strike 3. If you get 2 or 3 false alarms, then the police aren't going to attend. Or if they attend, there is a bill back. There'll be a $75 or $100 charge that's recovered. We don't have that, and as for the municipality to capture any revenue from that, I'd have to look into if there is a mechanism for that. But the OPP per se, we've never adopted that principle. What we try to do is a lot of education, trying to get people to ensure that everybody knows how to use their alarms. And over the last number of years, and taking COVID out of the picture, the numbers have been coming down across the county with false alarms, both residential and commercial. But they are still calls that we have to attend.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions with what's been presented so far? Okay, keep going, Dean.
Okay. If you want to scroll down, I think Lisa's got control of this. Okay. Okay. Yeah, so the next page just shows what our clearance rate is for the different calls. And there's a caveat at the bottom, is that these clearance rates are fluid, because we are constantly solving crimes outside of the month and years. So at the time when the report was written, this is where the clearance rates were for the so for example, violent crime was up 13% in clearance rates from 75 versus 61 from the year before. Property crime clearance rates dropped from 13 to 6%. So we had almost a 7% decrease looking from 19 to 20. And the drug crime, that's the category that catches that is the reason it's showing up zeros right now is these are drug investigations. So drug projects, it's not drug seizures that officers are making at the side of the road or in contact. So with those, we have ongoing investigations in all the communities in the county. So until charges are laid, that's will always remain blank. So overall, they're showing that the clearance rates, the average clearance rates for violent property and drugs has gone up from 25 in 19 to 27.3 in 2020. And I reported this or sent this to Tina back in the very beginning of the month. If I was to run a report today, those numbers would be different.
Oh, okay.
just because as charges are being processed through the courts, that's how we. So I can always provide if there's any questions or concern. Tomorrow I can pull up new numbers, and if there's a change, I can report back to the council.
Okay. Any questions on this one? This slide? Appears not.
All right, so this is just a breakdown of the collisions from 2019 to 2020, and in all categories. In looking at 2019, and there's been a decrease in every category. So just looking at, I guess with the way it's laid out, may not show, you may not be able to see both my my charts, but in 2019, Lucan Biddulph had 24 accidents between August and December. 2020, there was 13. A great number that reports in 2020 is in the column of deceased. There's no fatalities in the area for that time period in 2020 versus 2 in the same time period in 2019. Number of injured dropped from 22 to 14. We had the again total total overall collisions of all the categories was reduced from 69 to 53. And what we look at for number of fatals, again, you had 0 in 2020. Number of personal injury accidents was 6 versus 10 the year before. Property damage accidents, so fender benders, any type of collision where nobody's hurt, went from 56 down to 47. Alcohol and drugs involved in 2019, there were 7 that were confirmed to have been alcohol or drug were a factor versus 3, and 60 versus 47 were not alcohol or drug related. At times it's unknown, and so we have to, if we don't know for certain, we have to score as unknown. Where we did see an increase was in the commercial motor vehicle. In 2019, there was 4 collisions. In 2020, there were 6. And then the number of single motor vehicle collisions, 44 versus 31. So overall, the collisions have gone down. And that's obviously it's a big factor for the OPP and for Middlesex OPP is we want to keep seeing those numbers drop through enforcement and education. Obviously the times where we have increase is the fall when deer are running. Our wildlife does pose problems, and then Mother Nature in wintertime. How she can bring up snow squalls and getting people used to readjusting their driving habits from spring, summer to winter driving, especially at the beginning when the first couple of snowfalls. So if any questions on the accident situations that I could.
Any questions?
I do have, sorry, Madam Mayor, I do have a question if I may. It's Daniel. Inspector, I just sort of along the lines of collisions and traffic. In the last year or so, I've had no less than 6 or 7 concerns from residents about speeding on our roads, particularly in Lucan. And I'm just wondering, I know that we're working on a program to sort of start some sort of campaign, but I wonder if you have some sort of suggestions for us. I found in the last couple of months, though, I've had an increasing number of complaints, people concerned about public safety, and a lot of kids, and especially because they're home from school now and you don't see them at, online when they're supposed to be perhaps. But I'm just wondering if you have any suggestions for our municipality about how we can make it a little safer.
Yeah, first and foremost, anytime that you have any of your community members coming forward with complaints, either directly or whatever's the most expedient way for you, email me and let me know, because we will, when I get the information from the communities that there's a concern, I'll send officers out there to, because at the Wilberforce Public School. We've had some concerns there, especially in the morning with crossing guards saying that vehicles were driving through, not paying attention. So those type of things I want to hear so that we can direct our officers to the areas that they need to be. Because obviously the counties, we have a big county, and I would rather have our attention focused at the spots where people are concerned. And sometimes what happens is, and we've done this in other parts of the county, is where residents have called in saying, you know, there's cars doing 80, 90 kilometers an hour on my street, and it's a 40 or 50. We go out and we, sometimes that is accurate. Sometimes it may not be as bad. And if we know who, you know, if we have a willing complainant who wants to sit with us, we'll actually have them sit in the vehicle and look at the vehicle speed so they can see in what perception and reality is. Not every car driving by, though it may be looking fast, may necessarily be doing the speed that they think. However, we do know that there are vehicles that do speed. Another suggestion, and I can't remember through Chris Trainey and the county, is the speed monitoring signs. If you post those up in, if you're able to get one from the county, post those up in, share that data with us so that if it will capture speed, it'll capture time, it'll capture high speed, low speeds. And then with that information, then we can assign the officers to ensure that, because again, we could go to Daniel, to any of the streets that your constituents are complaining about, but we may be there at the wrong time. So we could get there at 2 o'clock in the afternoon when there's no traffic, and yeah, people see us there, they're happy that we're there. But if the times are at 8 in the morning or 6 at night when people are, you know, and that's typically when it's morning and evening when people are going to and from work. But with that information, together with the community and the detachment, we can work on a plan to best put the resources where there's likely going to be a bigger impact of education and enforcement.
Thank you. No, I know for a fact there are residents that would, I'm included, I'll sit in a cruiser with somebody and point them. I have no problem with that, with the number of children that we've got. I'm just wondering too, those stats that you're talking about, I'm just wondering, because we do have digital speed signs, and I'm just wondering if those are the stats you're talking about that we can pass on, because I think they go right to Jeff, I think.
Okay, yeah, I'm not sure, because yeah, different municipalities have, for example, we had the similar concerns down Southwest Middlesex, and they were able to give the printout at times that when the sign was being activated by the motoring public. And yeah, that information, if you share with us, then we can build a better, like a more fundamentally developed plan to ensure we're doing the right thing at the right time.
Okay, I appreciate you letting me know that we can email you with those concerns. Yep. Thank you very much, Inspector. Yep. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Yep. Any other questions for Dean on the traffic or anything else? I guess, oh, Councillor Westman.
Yeah, just to reiterate, I mean, I'm the councillor for Ward 3, which includes Cranton, and yeah, we do get a lot of traffic through town. I know that there's been some enforcement recently, so that's good. We will be putting some digital radar signs up shortly, and hopefully that'll help gather some data for you and help slow people down. But I mean, there's always the perception that the police are never there when we need them, but I've seen your staff over there doing speed enforcement, and that is good. And it helps to you know, improve perception as well, and we really appreciate that. So
thank you, Alex. I appreciate that. And yeah, and that's again with the information that those signs bring back, especially again with everybody, the council and any members of your community who are in direct contact with community members. It does help us again with that perception of being there, because if we're in the areas where the public wants us, as opposed to where we think there's traffic concerns, it helps bridge the again, that perception versus reality that we're never around. Now, having said that, we know that I'd love to have another 35 officers in Middlesex, and I could have 6 in every community, 24/7. That's unfortunately, every time I bring that up, it's laughed at. But it's
those days are long gone.
Yeah, Yes, unfortunately. But just like the Montreal Canadiens, if you don't shoot, you don't score. So,
Yes, yes, that's a whole other discussion.
yes, and I'm sorry, I should make this a controversial call. I apologize.
Just since we've talked about the speeding signs, I don't know, Jeff, just to be clear, do our signs collect that data all the time, or do we have to set it up to collect that data?
So, Madam Mayor, yeah, so we, presently we have two. We have a permanent one on Main Street by the arena, and we have a portable one that we set up through different areas. The one on that is we take to different spots. We do pay a yearly fee, and we do get the printouts that Inspector was talking about. And in fact, I think we did communicate, I believe last summer on the Roman line, we had an issue that we noticed a vehicle at a certain time of the day going excessive speeds, and I think it worked out great. And I know the residents on Roman line were happy to see. That doesn't stop everybody all the time, but if you can, like the perfect example, when we can nail down that information and find a time of the day, we can coordinate efforts, and it works really well. So, and I know we have two more signs, or actually three more signs coming. We'll have to make a decision on how much information we want, because there is a yearly activation fee on each one. But that's the perfect example of what we were talking about there, is trying to bring that information to the OPP, and we are capable in the municipality to do that. So.
Perfect. Thank you for that. Dean, I was just going to ask you, I was surprised to see in the traffic statistics that you shared, the decrease in the collisions. I mean, I know, early on in 2020, I think everybody was saying that because everybody was staying at home, but that, August to December, we were still we weren't at necessarily stay at home orders. We were trying to get back to the way things, we want them to be. So was that a trend that you've seen across the county, or was this something that was kind of an anomaly?
Well, I wouldn't say it was an anomaly, because I love those numbers. So I don't want to put, I don't want to just push them aside with just luck. But the simple answer is no. It wasn't the same across the county during the last part. But you're absolutely right. At the beginning, everything in policing from March until probably mid-June came to a standstill. Our traffic and my office on the Exeter Road, looking over the 401, it was eerie at times, not seeing any vehicles passing on the 401. But yeah, since August and even now with our stay-at-home order, it doesn't look like things have really slowed down at all. Traffic's back to normal. So yeah, I don't have a real honest answer as to why the numbers are down. We are constantly, and I know the municipality is in the county, and there's public education, there's police education. We do have enforcement throughout the year. That's a factor. And then sadly, it's sometimes it's those the stories in the news that hit home, that then correct driving behaviors when somebody realizes, okay, yeah, my uncle was that driver, or my neighbor was that driver. So it's happy to report that the numbers are down, but I don't have a definitive answer. Like, I wish I could be able to say this is why.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. Okay, any last questions for Dean before we let him go for the evening? Okay, with that, I'll thank you for joining us again. It was great to see you. Appreciate you sharing all that information, and hopefully members of our community will watch back and learn something more about the statistics in our community. But as I say, thanks for joining us. Usually see you about once a month at our emergency control group meetings. Hopefully we'll be able to lift those one day soon. Yes. But certainly it's been a different year, and we appreciate, as always, the support of not only you, but your team and your presence in Lucan Biddulph. So thanks for that.
Well, Your Worship, Council, thanks for this opportunity to meet with you tonight. And I also extend, it's been a tough year for, well, a tough year and a half now for everybody. The community support that has come from all across the county, but as I've said, gotta be careful with this being recorded, is Lucan is one of my favorite communities. Is that
Pardon me?
no, I've said that before and I'll say it again. With my policing time in Lucan, it was very enjoyable. Yeah, the community support, the support with councils that we've had is made it bearable for the officers. We have received a lot of praise from the public with things that have gone on, and those little thank yous and whatnot go a long way. So with that, I thank you for your support of us. So
Good. Thanks very much. It was good seeing you.
okay. Take care, everybody.
Yeah. Good night. Okay, moving on to our second presentation, and it's great to have Christine Scrimgeour with us tonight, albeit virtually. Maybe one of these days, you know, soon we'll actually be able to see you in person. I was thinking, when I saw that you were going to be presenting, I thought, oh, it seems like such a long time since I've seen you. And usually when, you know, you and your team are involved in the audit, you know, come in and you were there or somebody from your team was there, and that just hasn't happened. And it's just been so strange, but I'm glad that you can join us this way. And next year, I'm sure it will be different and we'll be able to do this in person. So I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you. It's nice to see everyone tonight. I will do my presentation, but before I get into it, I just want to say thank you to your treasurer and her staff. It has been a strange way to audit, needless to say. The second year in a row, we sort of had most of it done the first year before COVID hit, so it wasn't as bad. This year was all under COVID restrictions. So just want to thank them for their facilitating us and sending us things and scanning us things and all of that good stuff. So thank you for that, Catherine, and your staff. All right, these are the draft audited financial statements for the year ended December 31st, 2020. I will go through them like I normally do. Please ask me any questions, and if I'm not explaining something properly, just let me know and I'll try and do better. So it is a clean auditor's opinion. So as auditors, sorry, oh, there we go, thank you. As auditors, we set a materiality, and for the township this year, it was $135,000. However, that doesn't mean we only look at transactions of $135,000. As your staff will tell you, every transaction is eligible for statistical sampling. So we look at all of taxes, or we statistically sample into taxes, into other revenue, into your payroll, and into your other expenses. And so every transaction that goes through the township is eligible for us picking it. As well, we lower that materiality to do subsequent event testing to ensure we've captured everything in these financial statements up to the end of December 31st. They are dated as of today's date, which means that as council, you are those charged with governance under the Canadian auditing standards. And so you, once they're approved, hopefully tonight, then we can finalize them and get the FIR filed with the province, and that's the completion of the year. So this is your consolidated statement of financial position. Most of you would be more familiar with the terminology balance sheet. And if you look at the line called net financial assets, right where this, there we go, it's coming in, just down, yeah. So about 3/4 of the way down the page, that is what you would have in the bank if everything was paid off, all your debt was paid off, everybody that owed you taxes paid you. And as you can see, it's had a significant increase. So about 2.7 million. So you're in a much better financial position this year at the end of the year. And having said that, if we look at some other key indicators, so I look at the net long-term liabilities first to see if you've taken out a lot of new debt in order to finance that. And you clearly haven't. Your debt has gone down by about $300,000. Then I look at your tangible capital assets. So the fourth last, the $41 million number, which is the big number on the balance sheet. So I want to see that number compared to last year's number is at least equal to it, if not greater, which means that you're acquiring more capital assets than you're using up. So the amortization is coming off of last year's balance, and then we add to it our new acquisitions in this year, and you can see that as well has gone up about $1 million. So you've increased your financial position, you've kept your tangible capital asset investment at a really good level, and you have not taken out new debt to do that. And so all of those things I look at. There are fluctuations within this balance sheet. A couple of things I'll highlight. You'll see accounts receivable looks like it's gone way up, and it has, but there's two very good reasons for that. One is that the Nagle Drive, we gave ratepayers the option at the end of the year. And so at the end of the year, that was sitting in accounts receivable. As well, we had two large new drains in 2020, and they have yet to be billed out to the ratepayers. So they're sitting in accounts receivable. So although accounts receivable have gone up, we don't have issues, or we don't have any concerns with the collection of those accounts receivable, which is always a concern. And then under accounts payable and accrued liabilities, it has gone up as well, but that's really just because of a lot of development and a lot of developer deposits that you have on hand at the end of 2020. As you're well aware, Lucan is growing rapidly, and that's all good news. And because of that, you have some more developer deposits on hand. So coming down at the end of the year, your accumulated surplus is 47 million compared to 43 million at the end of 2019. Any other questions on that page?
I have a question. It's Daniel, if I can, Madam Mayor.
Absolutely.
Thank you. So when under non-financial assets, capital work in progress
Yes.
is an asset. I don't know what a capital work in progress is.
It's a good question. So what that is any projects that we've started. So let's say we've started a road project, we weren't able to complete it, or a water project and we weren't able to complete it. It's in progress. So we don't start amortizing it until the project is completed. So it's part of capital assets as well. It's just projects that aren't completed yet.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor.
Okay. Any other questions at this point? Okay.
Okay. Next statement is your revenues and expenditures. So I'll remind council, the budget for 2020 includes your capital expenditures that you want it to accomplish in the year. The actuals have those capital assets now on the balance sheet, which we talked about, but it has amortization in it. And then the actual 2019. So the best comparison really, because the budget is done on a non-PSAB basis, which basically means it includes capital as we buy it, as opposed to as we amortize it. I look at the actual 2020 to the actual 2019, and I've got a couple comments on that. That user charges number, the increase there, as I mentioned, that Nagle Drive. So this is where it flows through as revenue. So you saw it as an accounts receivable on the balance sheet, and now we see it as user charges under actual 2020. And then that last line that looks a little odd is other revenue. So that is where we've had land sales of our the industrial land that we own. So last year we had more than we did in 2020. So 2019, we had a significant amount. And then this year, obviously there was a slowdown a little bit just because of the COVID restrictions. And then other government grants, we did have some capital government grants in 2019 that we didn't have in 2020. And the increase over budget for government grants is that Safe Restart money for COVID. And investment income is down, as it is everywhere with rates the way they are. So those are the fluctuations under revenue. Under expenditures, I'll compare again 2020 to 2019 because they both have amortization in them, so they're a little bit more comparable. General government is very consistent. Protection is, transportation is, environmental is up a little bit just because of new work that was done that didn't meet the capitalization criteria. Recreation and cultural, as you can see, is down, and as that's, you would expect that because of the cost of not being able to conduct the or obeying the protocols from the province. And then under planning and development, the 568,000 last year included the land, that land held for resale that we have. We've got the land sales up above, but then we've got the costs of that land, the various servicing costs that we did on that land is included in planning and development costs last year. And because we didn't have as many sales this year, that's why the costs are down. So overall costs are down. about $300,000, and those two, really the recreation is the big one with, and then the land held for resale. Servicing costs. So then that next line, that excessive revenue over expenditures there, that you can see, that is another line indicator I look at. So that's really your net operating surplus. So that's including the using up of those capital assets. And you can see you've gone in the right direction, 816,000 last year, $1.1 million this year. Everything below that line is capital. And this is where we get into some big numbers, and I'll explain these because they look a little strange. So government transfers looks reasonable compared to budget. The gain loss on disposal of capital assets, as you're aware, we uploaded Whale and Line to the county, and because of that, we had to get it out of our books. And that was the net book value of what, there's a few other disposals as well in the year, but that's the big one, causing that $2 million. So you didn't lose $2 million, you've uploaded those roads, that road to the county, as I mentioned. And then other developer and developer and other contributions related to capital. So what that is when we assume any subdivision, we also assume all of the services they've put in because they're now ours to operate. And so that is the assumption of 2 subdivisions during 2020. Of that 4.5 million, almost 4 million is that assumption of those subdivisions. So that's things like water, wastewater, storm ponds, parkland, roads, streetlights. I think that was, yeah, that's right. And so that's all included in that 4.5 million. Otherwise, it would be very consistent with budget, but that's, so what we do is we add those assets to your tangible capital assets, and then we record it as a revenue as they've donated it really, or we've assumed them because they paid for the costs up front. Coming down to the end of the year, that accumulated surplus that I mentioned on the balance. Any questions at all on that?
Don't see any.
Okay. The next couple statements. So this one is just cash flow increases and decreases of the non-cash items on the balance sheet. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because we've already talked on these major changes that happened on the balance sheet. So if we want to keep going forward, Lisa, I think you've got the control here. Yep, there we go. This statement I would like to stop at. It's kind of a nice summary of what's gone on in capital. So you'll see there that we've there's the disposal of Whale and Line, the 2 million. We've amortized $1 million, and then we've acquired new assets of almost 5 million. So that's why the increase on the balance sheet of the net. So this is really the ins and outs of all of that capital, showing how we ended up. And as you can see, significant increase there. We then get to the notes to the financial statement. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these. They stay consistent year to year. I will remind you that we do eliminate 49% of the with South Perth's share of the one fire board. So that's why the fire that is in the first note. If you want to, so this note, Lisa, if you just stop here for a second, this, so the net long-term liabilities at the end of the year, this is where you see no new debt, and then the repayment over the next 5 years. And then if you continue on the next note, yeah, that one right there. If you want to stop there for a second, that this is really the note probably council is most interested in. So this shows your capital, investment in capital at the top. Then we show all the reserves. So you can see there that we've had a 2.5 million increase in reserves, which is really your savings for the future. And water, wastewater were the 2 main ones. We also, public works, we didn't do as many projects, and so we didn't take as much out of reserves as we had in the past. And then the tax rate stabilization has gone up, and that's because this year we had a current operating surplus of 475,000. So we, according to your minutes, that's where we placed that money, and that's to be used as council sees fit. And then we do have reserve funds at the bottom that are for the 2 fire boards. So the difference between reserves and reserve funds is that the reserve funds earn their own interest. which is fair with the fire boards. We want to make sure that we keep that money in their own accounts and allocate the proper revenue to that.
Maybe just before, did you want to keep moving or did you want to take?
No, I
questions?
just want to ask if there's any questions on that, because this is kind of the guts of where you're at right now.
Any questions for Christine on that? I guess I've got two, and since we're on the reserve page, I guess I don't know whether or not there's a comfort level that we can have, but I guess looking at them, I mean, we have from 2019 to 2020, there has been a significant increase in them. So should we feel comfortable, and I guess not to compare ourselves, but to compare ourselves, what do you see against other municipalities our size?
So obviously the fact you're going in this direction is a good thing. I will remind council, you look at water operations and capital, just under $1 million, and we all know what any kind of expansion in a water system costs. We also know that there are very few grants out there anymore, although we get to some good news at the end of these financial statements on the recreation grant that you got. But so yes, they're healthy, but again, continuing to build, especially in the area of water, wastewater, and then the roads. The roads one, really, we didn't do as much work, so we're getting that nicely back up to where it got depleted a bit in 2019, if you remember, and so we're back up where it was at the end of 2018, which is great. So you're definitely going in the right direction. Water, wastewater always makes me nervous, just from the standpoint of what those systems and expansions cost.
Yeah, that's for sure. I don't know whether or not we'd ever be in a position of having a savings for that, but
I know.
And then you did on one of the previous pages talk about our debt, and I guess again, are there any concerns with our debt load? You spoke about it at the beginning, and then again, as I say, one or two pages back.
Yeah, there it is.
Yeah.
So no, I don't, and you're definitely within. So what happens with there's it's called an ARL, which is your annual repayment limit, that's published by the province to each municipality once you filed your FIR, and you're well within that. You're not even in any, like, even close to that. And as you can see, really $200,000 of debt on all of the new construction that you've had over the last, like you've improved your facilities, your building, I think of the public works, I think of the municipal office, I think of all those things. And you're after this 2021 year, you can see you go down almost $100,000 in payment per year. So I know we may be adding to that, but right now that's where we're at.
No, but I mean, debt is there also as a tool to us. So, but we just want to make sure that, there's not any concerns with overloading that. So
no, not at all. No, you're well within your limits.
Okay, thank you.
And then the rest of the notes, the only one I really wanted to talk about was the last couple of them. Lisa, down another page, I think. Yeah, right there. If you just want to stop. Oops, sorry. Come on back one page, please. There we go. So the new note, two new notes. 15 is just an expansion of the previous year's note regarding COVID, and obviously that you followed the provincial orders regarding essential services, and some of your services were closed because of that. And that's where you've recognized in these financial statements 88,207 of the restart money. There is restart money in your obligatory reserves, what you didn't spend, and then there was the second round in 2021, sorry. And then subsequent event note, we just had Ron and Catherine look at this. This is just basically wording off of their notification of their, and that the project right now is was estimated at 9.2. And again, that obviously has to be tendered. So that's why I wanted to put that in there, because we all know costs of construction are going up because of all of the lack of supply, and then how you're going to fund it. The last two schedules, so this is your breakdown of your tangible capital assets, and as you can see, infrastructure is about 60% of your total assets, and that's where I get into the water, wastewater really, and public works. Your buildings and fixtures are in good condition, obviously, because of how new they are. And then the last schedule is just your segmented information. So the FIR that I keep mentioning that goes to the province is broken down by function. These are the functions that the province recognizes. So this just breaks down your revenues and expenditures by each one of those functions.
Okay, any questions on the last couple of slides? Okay.
And then with the trust fund, so there's a small amount of ORP money. If any of those of you who have been around a lot of years will remember ORP from way back when. Unfortunately, the province doesn't have anyone in for any longer in even that wants to talk about this. So we've still got $1,297 of their money, which at some point in time we would pay back to the province. So it's not reflected in your financial statements. This is just a separate financial statement for that effect.
Okay. 12, you said 1,292, right?
Yeah, 12, I think 97. Yeah, 1297.
Yeah. Oh, 1297. Yeah. I was thinking it's not one of those sheets where it's actually, 1.2 million. You don't put
No, it's very minor.
No. Okay.
It's not going to bankrupt you, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's good. Okay. Appreciate that. Any questions for Christine on what's been presented? As always, it's a great report, and I would echo your thanks to Catherine and her team. I know that they've been a great support to you, and I think it's a mutual admiration society. Everybody enjoys working with each other, but it's, I think, very, from an elected official standpoint, and then for our residents to see how this department in particular has been able to work remotely and keep things going and work with you is definitely a real bonus, and we're thankful for that for sure. Did you want anything to add, Catherine?
Just echoing, just want to say thanks to Christine and her team. They're always a pleasure to work with, and they're always available to answer questions and to help out in any way. Just appreciate all the support. So I just want to say thank you again.
You're welcome.
So if there aren't any questions from council, we do have a recommended motion that council accepts the draft financial statements as presented tonight. And if so, I would ask for a mover and a seconder for that, please. Councillor Westman and Councillor Regan, all in favor, and that is carried. Thanks very much, Christine. And
hey, nice to see you all. Hope we get to see each other in person soon.
Yeah.
Be well. Good night.
Yeah. Thanks. Okay, on to the adoption of the minutes. You have in front of you the council minutes from May 18th. And if nothing has to be amended, then I would ask for a mover and a seconder to approve the minutes of May 18th as circulated. Councillor Regan and Deputy Mayor Manders, all in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. Moving on to the business arising. We've had a couple of items taken off, and I believe everything is ongoing and will be for the next little bit. Did council have anything that they wanted added to business arising? Okay, on to correspondence. So there's actually not as many items as we've had in the last couple of weeks, but there are a couple that staff has pulled. The first one, actually, I asked Tina to put back on. It was on our last set of course of communications, and I meant to speak to it, and I just forgot. And it is a letter from actually a local member of Parliament, Karen Vecchio. She's from Elgin, Middlesex, London. So she carries right up actually to number 7 and all the way down to St. Thomas. So she's our neighboring MP. But anyways, she has asked that communities consider supporting a motion for a 988 number, which would turn into a national 3-digit suicide and crisis hotline. And I know it's that this motion has been endorsed by the county of Middlesex, as well as a number of our neighboring municipalities. So I was hoping that perhaps maybe there would be interest from our council to do the same. Interestingly enough, I'm attending FCM this week and virtually. And this afternoon, Aaron O'Toole was one of the speakers, and he actually spoke about this and definitely said that, you know, if they become the leaders in government, in Parliament, then this would be one of the first things that they would be pushing through as a national crisis hotline number. So anyways, I do think it's important. We've just had a presentation by the OPP. We hear about the stresses of mental health. So if council would be interested, there is a draft motion that Karen has included in her request. And then Tina's also attached a recent correspondence from Aurora where they have endorsed the motion as well. So I'm looking to my colleagues for interest, support, nothing. Councillor Westman?
Yeah, that is my full support. I make that motion.
I would second that.
Okay, and you're comfortable just using the draft motion as it appears that MP Vecchio provided? I won't read the whole thing, but it does speak to anybody watching this can go back to our agenda, and it's printed in the agenda. It's a fairly lengthy motion, but it does speak to the pressures of COVID and increased demand for suicide prevention and that sort of thing, and does reference the fact that the United States is going forward with the same program starting in 2022. So moved by Councillor Westman and seconded by Councillor Regan. All in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much for that. Then the second one has to do with upcoming AMO conference in August. And I believe Ron's got an update on requests for delegations.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I just realized I've not said a word yet in this meeting. I think that's a record, actually. Thank you. This is the standard delegation request for the upcoming AMO conference. The due date for these requests is Friday, June the 4th. Collectively, the county lower tier CAOs have met and have discussed, I guess a bit of an idea put forth by our mayor in regards to it's better to go everyone together asking for one thing. So what the county CAO has sent out today is that there's basically they're looking at two options. The first option is that we do one comprehensive presentation involving all municipalities with multiple ministers and a common presentation, or a series of individual presentations by local municipalities using a common presentation. And I think the consensus out there is to use number two, to hit them on multiple fronts with multiple delegations to try and get a little more attention than just everybody going in at once. So I think with the nod of the head from council, we will continue to fine tune that I guess request for delegation. And in all likelihood, if things go according to what we'd like, we will get those requests in by Friday. And what we're after is actually to discuss the requirements for infrastructure investment. So what we're trying to do is garner some support from the province with regards to infrastructure investments, and not necessarily new infrastructure, but renewal stuff, that it does continue to support the economy, and it does put money into the economy, creates jobs. It's good for everybody. So I think with the blessing of council, we will continue down that path, and we will get our request in by the due date this Friday.
Councillor Regan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Ron, if I can ask just a question, when you said that when you're going to use a common approach or a common for it's like every municipality would go in sort of with a common presentation. My concern is that there, each municipality is different, and the needs of our community may be a little bit different than other communities. And I'm just wondering, like, if we make a presentation, we're going to tailor it to Lucan Biddulph and not that would be my concern.
Yeah, I think the format will be the same, but I believe it'll be tailored to what Lucan Biddulph needs or what North Middlesex needs or whatever, but it's the same type of format. So yes, the actual infrastructure projects may be different, but the process and the form will be the same.
Okay, all right. Okay, I feel better now. Okay, thank you. Thanks, Madam Mayor.
Just to give you a little bit background, Councillor Regan, I guess it's probably about 2 months ago now, Ron.
Yeah.
All of the mayors got together with our two MPPs in the area, Monty McNaughton and Jeff Urick. And this was what we talked about was our infrastructure needs and the fact that we all have this aging infrastructure. And yeah, in Lucan, it might be, the wastewater plant. In Southwest Middlesex, it might be something else, but the need is still there for provincial dollars to come down to communities to help with these infrastructure, the infrastructure that we already have. And we need this kind of continuous investment. So that's really the ask. It's not necessarily that we're going to go and we're going to ask for money for Lucan, but it's to try and get a sustainable program for communities across the province for infrastructure renewal, because that seems to always be a piece that seems to be missing when dollars are being handed out. They're looking for new projects, but it's that renewal, right? And we only have to look at what we're having to deal with, and how we're going to have to look at our aging infrastructure and how it has to be expanded, not only for growth, but because of age. And it's happening, as I say, not just in Lucan Biddulph, but right across the province. So it's really trying to advocate for a sustainable funding to come down for this sort of infrastructure.
All right, thank you. All right, thank you. I understand it better now. Thank you. Thank you, Ron. Thank you, Kathy. Mayor.
Was there any other talk about the about delegations? And I think both Ron and I have talked offline that at this stage that there's really nothing for our community that we need a specific delegation to a specific a member of parliament or a cabinet minister or a ministry, excuse me, at this time. We've done quite well the last few years with our delegations and our asks, but at this point, there's really nothing that's personalized to us, right, Ron?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. Any other? Now, those are the only two that we pulled. Was there any items that any council wanted to speak to? So I just wanted to just draw your attention to the first one in the list, and it was a letter that was shared with the Premier from me in my position as warden. Our Middlesex Economic Resiliency Task Force undertook a survey of businesses across the county, and we just shared with him the results of that survey. And I thought it was really important information to share with you on the sort of asks that they were looking for. Obviously there's no surprise, 80% of local businesses have reported a decrease in revenue. And the other significant thing that came out was the fact that the businesses that have been most affected have been female-led businesses. So that was an interesting statistic that came out of that survey, but I thought you would be interested in that information. So if there isn't any other communications that you wanted to speak to, I would ask for a motion to receive those for information, please. Councillor Westman and Deputy Mayor Manders. And all in favor? And that's carried. Moving on to committee reports, CEDC, Lisa. Oh, can't hear you, even though it says you're not muted. Paul had this issue last time, I think. Okay, I'm going to move on because there isn't anything for CEDC. Blue Water.
No, nothing to add. No.
Okay. Lake Huron, I have a meeting coming up on Thursday, but Jeff and I attended I guess it's the first official or second meeting of the group that's getting together to discuss governance models for the Lake Huron and the Elgin board. And it was very informative. I thought that it was kind of another recap of why it is that we're doing what we're doing. I didn't think at that point that there was any new information that was shared. Andrew had come to Lucan Biddulph probably 2 years ago, almost now, 18 months, 2 years ago now, and had pretty much given us the recap. So I was very comfortable with what was presented, and I would just look to Jeff. I didn't think that there was anything really new to report at this point on it. No. And we will continue to update you as we meet. Fire boards, there's nothing. ABCA in Upper Thames, Alex.
Yes, through you, Madam Mayor. There's a couple of things. I'm going to kind of combine the two because they're really kind of affecting both conservation authorities. Obviously, our budget numbers versus the actual expenditures, we still have a lot with both conservation authorities. We have capital projects that are outstanding that were just deferred because of COVID and operational concerns and safety. So we're hoping to get working on those this year as time permits, and obviously that does affect, like with everything else, with any capital project, it will affect cost by deferring it because there's obviously inflation on materials and what have you. What affects both conservation authorities also are planning applications. So as we all know, during with various different planning applications that go with the construction of buildings or property developments, the conservation authorities are involved, and oftentimes there seems to be a long time getting these things approved, and so we're both conservation authorities are obviously working on finding ways to expedite that process so that we can get these planning applications approved and moved forward. Obviously, there continues to be concern with the province's changes to the Conservation Act, so we're plodding through those ever-changing changes, and I think we're going to be there. So on a good news thing, Sauble Bayfield has had some great success with turtle releases. We've had every year, and I brought it up before, but every year we have staff that go out and collect eggs. The morbidity rate for egg clutches is very high, whether through predation from animals eating the eggs or through other causes. The survival rate from, say, 100 eggs for a turtle to mature to adulthood is very, very low. It's only maybe a half dozen out of 100. But with our efforts, they're able to improve that number significantly and get it up into the 60 or 70, which is great. So that's actually helped restore a lot of the stability for a lot of these turtle species in the community, the waterways and in the watershed. So it's a good news story there. So that's about it. We continue to try to keep our trails open for people to use, and we ask that people use them responsibly, no off-leash dogs. That's been a bit of an issue for some of our conservation areas, and obviously no motorized vehicles. Of late, there's been a big problem with people using trails and conservation areas for off-road vehicles, motorcycles and quads and things. There's been a number of involvement with the police laying charges. So we hope that people will respect that these are areas not for motorized vehicles. So that's it. That's all I got.
That's great. Thanks very much, Alex. Any questions for Councillor Westman? So my property is kind of right at the top of the Upper Thames, and I have to tell you that we have a number of turtles on our property this year. And actually, the last one we saw was probably about that big. And he has, yes, he's found his home and seems to enjoy it at High Point Meadows. So, okay, Parks and Rec, Paul.
Nothing at this moment, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Moving on to staff reports, Ron.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The first item to report is the mayor and I actually met with the officials from the Thames Valley District School Board. They were basically giving us the heads up that they were considering a report at the staff from their staff with regards to a recommendation for submitting a capital request to the province. So what their plan is to submit a capital request to the province for the expansion of the Wilberforce Public School. So everyone may have noticed the construction on the parking lot expansion has already been started. I think it was last week that it started. So they are going to be recommending to the province that Wilberforce School be expanded. So that is great news for our community. We're looking forward to that. It doesn't mean that it's going to get approved this year, but at least it's seen as a priority within the Thames Valley District School Board. So that's the positive. There was a question at the last meeting with regards to the timeline for a public meeting with regards to the official plan update. So the staff have had discussions with the planner, Dan Fitzgerald, as well as Stuart Finlater. And it would appear that the best estimate for the timing of a public meeting in regards to the official plan update would be early September. And the reason for that is council is due to receive the master servicing study from BM Ross. And that's a pretty important piece of information that council is going to need to understand and digest before we get to that public meeting stage. So I believe it was the deputy mayor's question as to when the public meeting will be. In all likelihood, it will be in September. So that's the best information I can give you at this point. The next point, the industrial park land sale. So Great Escape RV has completed the purchase of the 10.5 acre site in the Lucan Biddulph industrial site. I believe that was completed yesterday. So that is another big win for our industrial park, and we welcome them, and we look forward to working with them for the development of that site within our industrial park. Quick reminder that the Lpat hearing on the Verhoot property is coming up, scheduled for Thursday and Friday, June the 24th and 25th, the end of this month. And of course, this hearing will be held virtually. So anyone interested, please get a hold of Tina, and she can give you the details as to how to participate or to view the proceedings. Next meeting, June 15th, we'll have consultant Jennifer Kirkham here. She will be presenting the draft report on the Middlesex Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan. So she is scheduled to present to council at our next meeting. And finally, I know everybody's tired of the whole COVID discussion, but I'm proud to announce that all our full-time office staff, public works staff, and public works employees, Parks Rec employees, everybo's had at least their first shot. So very proud of our staff for taking up the torch and moving things forward. So, and Madam Mayor, that's all I had.
Thank you. Just wondered about our process for Ward 2.
Oh, yes, of course. So if typically what happens, the resignation is read out and it's accepted by motion. So I believe Tina has prepared a motion to, number one, accept the resignation of the Ward 2 councillor. Second part of that motion will be for council to formally declare the seat vacant. At that point in time, the clock starts ticking. Council has 60 days in order to make a decision, either to appoint someone to fill that position or to pass a bylaw requiring a by-election. So there are some options out there, and we do have a policy. So what I would suggest, or the staff suggestion to council, would be to basically request council to staff to do a formal report, present that to report at the next meeting, June the 15th, outlining the various options that are available to council. And then council can, if they feel comfortable, they can make a decision on the 15th. If not, we still have the meeting in July to make that decision.
Okay, any questions for Ron? Councillor Regan.
My concern, thank you, Ron. Thank you, Madam Mayor. My concern, Ron, is just the timeline. I think the people of Ward 2 would, I think, need somebody in that position right away as soon as possible. I mean, of course, we're going to wait for what staff says. I'm just wondering, can we get a report before the next meeting, or can we make an, I've never been through this process, so I don't know. I guess, again, my concern is just about the people of Ward 2, about having representation. I think as well, a number of things that are going to be happening in our community, that we need to get a person into that position and brought up to speed with respect to sort of what's going on. There are a number of things. This is, again, just my thoughts on that. So I'm just wondering, I mean, just with timeline, because now we're talking into July, and I know that you have the 60 days, and I'm certainly not trying to rush it or be reckless or anything like that. But I do think that we need to move on this sooner than later. I'm not sure how my fellow council members feel about that, or if I'm out of line with procedure. I'm sure you'll straighten me out.
Ron.
No, through you, Madam Mayor, to answer the question. I have every confidence in the 4 members of council here that you'll be able to make your decision at the June 15th meeting, 2 weeks from tonight. And we'll get to that report well in advance ahead of the meeting. So if there is any questions or anything, we can make sure those questions get answered, so you can actually make a decision on the 15th of June.
All right. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thanks, Ron.
Councillor Westman.
Yeah, to Councillor Reagan's point, Madam Mayor, through you. Being the old guy here on council, I've been reminded many times over the years by the mayors and by our chief administrative officer that while we each represent our own wards, we also represent the entirety of the township. So any persons in Ward 2 that need representation, they can count on our mayor, our deputy mayor, and our other ward councillors to be there for them every time, always. We are a community. I liken it to our scouting organization here in town, which I'm a member of as well. But regardless of which division, whether it's Beavers, Cubs, or Scouts, we all look after our kids and we look after each other. So in our community, each council member, the mayor, and all members of staff, we're here for the people. So I know that we can fill this position in a reasonable time. And I know that our residents are going to be well represented. So if anybody has a need, reach out to any one of us.
Thank you for that, Alex. That's what I was just going to say, was that I'm assuming that there will be some sort of social media post after this meeting to indicate that Councillor Masterakis has stepped down and that there's a vacancy, a report is coming, but that also should there be an issue in Ward 2, that any one of the 4 of us, to reach out to any one of the 4 of us. So that would be good. Okay, so the motion that's been prepared is that council accepts the resignation of Ward 2 Councillor Peter Masterakis as submitted and formally declares the Ward 2 council seat as vacant as per section 260, subsection 2 of the Municipal Act And further, that council directs staff to bring forward a report with options for replacing the Ward 2 council seat. And maybe what I can add to that is at the next meeting, so that at least there's the time in that. Okay, so if I can get a mover and a seconder for that, please. Councillor Regan and a seconder. Deputy Mayor Manders, all in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. Okay, any other questions for Ron at this time? Hey, Tina.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor. Just a couple of updates. The Council Code of Conduct unfortunately was not able to come forward at this meeting, but hopefully we'll be ready for the second meeting. Mr. Stewart had some other matters to attend to, so he's just working on that review right now. And then the next meeting will be launching the eScribe meeting management software. So there will be some communication coming out to you guys ahead of time. Please reach out to me if you have any questions, but hopefully it's a fairly smooth process. You'll note on this agenda a couple of changes with the recommended motions included. That was just to kind of give you an idea of that's how agendas will look going forward. So I think that's everything.
Okay. Any questions for Tina? Okay, Catherine.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The report I have in front of you tonight is just providing a bit more details about the financial impacts of COVID for 2020. Christine did allude to a couple of those numbers in her presentation. This report just provides you with some details. So as you know, we received some funding from the government called the Safe Restart funding to be used against the operating pressures for 2020 related to COVID-19 pandemic. We received just over $123,000. And so after looking at the numbers and different things that happened last year, I put together some of the summary of how we used those funds. So of course we had some lost revenue, particularly in the Parks and Rec department, as that's where our user fee is heavily based, whereas the rest of the municipality really doesn't depend on user fees. It's really based on taxes and other government monies. And then we had some the financial relief measures, which was reported on last fall, but it was basically when we deferred the increase in the water rates, and as well as waiving penalty and interest last June. And then some other minor things that basically those financial implications or financial relief measures that council put in place last year that expired last June. And then we had some added expenses that we would not have had if not for COVID. So I've listed those there, and that encompasses all the different departments, including fire departments, information in there to utilize this fund. And so in the end, we used, of the 123,000, we used about 88,000, and the remainder is, as per the agreement, is to be put into a reserve fund. So I've created a specific reserve fund for the COVID-19 pressure to reserve to use for COVID-19 pandemic operating pressures. So that 35 will carry forward. We can use that for 2021. And also, as you know, we got additional funding to be used in 2021 as well. We have a good pot to draw from as we evaluate this year's operating pressures related to COVID, and that we've not budgeted for, I guess. And that's really all. So as I think most, what I've seen in my experience in talking with other smaller municipalities, it's those we fared pretty well, and I think that's the same case in those that are not, don't rely on user fees to run their services. So that's it. It's just for your information at this point.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Catherine. Any questions on that? And again, and just to reiterate the point that this is just for 2020. So we're not even talking about the latest lockdown and how that it will be impacted, but these are 2020 numbers. So if there aren't any questions, I would ask for a mover and a seconder to receive Catherine's report for information. Councillor Westman and Councillor Regan. All in favor? and that's carried. Do you have anything else, Catherine?
Not tonight, thank you.
Any other questions for Catherine while she's here? Okay, moving on, Public Works, Jeff.
Madam Mayor, some verbal updates on the department and what's been happening in Public Works. As everybody, if anybody's been down and around Main Street, you'll see construction continues. Frank Street is going to see pavement. The first base coat will go down hopefully later this week, maybe tomorrow. That's great news. That'll seal everything up. And we're getting to the point where we're about 90% complete on Frank Street. So that's really good news. So other update, the flower program has started. I think everybody will start to see some of the hanging baskets and some of the beds have been planted. And so that's nice to see. It makes you feel summer's coming along. Maintenance gravel, what's coming, maintenance gravel will start Friday or Monday on the west side of the municipality. It's a little bit dry out there, but we've got dust control plan to follow shortly after the fresh gravel goes down. As well, we've started, engineering has started on Saintsbury, on the urbanizing of Saintsbury. We've also begun engineering on Alice Street. We're looking at the sanitary water and the street itself on Alice. So that engineering has started. We talked about the steering committee. The bridge, replacement bridge on the Roman line, the tender is out. The tender will close June 15th. And so we'll see, that'll give us an indication of what costs are out there. We're hopefully we're still in line with budget numbers. So next meeting, I'm hoping to have more information for council on the bridge tender. Around town, you may have noticed there's a couple of some new lines have been painted. We did some pedestrian lines over on Campanelli to support the trail system. And what this is meant to do is just to help pedestrians funnel across the road at Gilmore and at Hearn, crossing Campanelli. We're also looking at some signs warning because traffic can come up off Campanelli, off of Walnut and sweep around the curve there. So we're just giving a heads up that be on the lookout for some pedestrians in that area. It's quite busy with the trail system over there. And then finally, BM Ross, I think we touched on the master servicing plan is coming along. We're probably going to be looking at bringing something to council in the next month or so. So that's good news. And once we can bring something out, it'll go public and we can get that and start digesting that information. As well, this week we have BM Ross is working on the sewage treatment plant E of A. And tomorrow, actually, we have an update meeting with them tomorrow. So it'll be interesting to see where we sit with that and go from there. And finally, there is one motion or bylaw at the end of the session to execute the water agreement. I know we had a report come back to council a little while ago on that, and we've just got everything in place, and the bylaw will be presented at a later date in this meeting. So other than that, that's my update, and we'll let her go with that.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. Any questions for Jeff on any of that or anything else? Okay, thanks, Jeff. Parks and Rec, Paul.
Thank you through you, Madam Mayor. No major updates right now, other than obviously with the hot weather and with the announcement from the province of their reopening phases, we've removed the ice at the Lucan Arena to mitigate costs, since we know we have a definite date a minimum definite date on when we can get people back into the arena. We will be following this very closely, because as things change, you never know. Guidelines and dates may change. So, we have some groups that are very anxious to get back in our arena, and we'll be watching it very closely. Other than that, the Parks and Rec team has been working very hard, getting some parks really up to speed in town here, grass cutting, some ground maintenance. baseball is really hoping to get back soon. So we're really ramping up some of our work on the diamonds, as well as some of you'll notice in front of the facility here, now that we have our beautiful new shamrock, we've also begun work on a sitting bus area for that incorporates the Lion's Arch, as well as a few benches that we have had donated to us well before COVID. Unfortunately, COVID hit and we couldn't have the dedications. So we're hoping that with the reopening that we can have dedications of these benches in this nice new area. Works very well with the bus stop being right there. And I think once the bus stop gets in use, which I'm sure it'll be very popular once people can go out, that it's going to be a great little sitting area for the community. So I'm anxious to have that dedication. So as soon as we're able to, I'll make sure council's all well aware so they can be in attendance.
Excellent. Thanks, Paul. Any questions for Paul? Just a couple things. I want to congratulate your staff. At our last meeting, it was right before the long weekend when you said, oh, the weather's going to be nice and the stay-at-home orders and nothing's changed. And unfortunately, we can't open up our splash pad. And we all, were laughing that, the only nice May 24th and no splash pad. Well, then the province, late on the day on Friday, announced that splash pads could be open, and your staff really did rise to the occasion and got the pad open. And I know a number of families enjoyed it over the weekend. So make sure you pass along our thanks and our congratulations to your staff.
I will. Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. As well, the water department, they were pretty helpful as well.
Yes, I should say, actually, it was a joint effort between Public Works and Water and Paul. So yes, definitely a team effort there. So thank you. I just had a question, not on what you brought up, and I guess I could do it under councillor comments, but I'll do it now. I had a question about the entrance to Market Street Park and the removal of some cobblestones or some patio, like however that walkway was, and they had been removed, and then a tree had come down. And what is the plan for that area?
Yes, so that area there, the tree itself, so those cement pavers, they actually used to be on Main Street back in 1984. They were brought over in the early 90s and kind of just made like a little surround around the tree. And then after that, it used to be a dirt path. So since we've put in the sidewalk a few years ago when I was an operator, we've been looking at that path and we really wanted to finish it off. And then the tree itself had begun to heave up a lot of those stones, making it a hazard. As well, the tree itself, although, and we kept saying this, it looked so green and nice shaped on the outside, the center had become hollow and was becoming a hazard as well. So in order to get that tree down and the stump removed, which is actually, we have some tree work coming up in the next week or so, which is going to be grinding out the stump. We had to remove the stones right around that tree. So the plan is to finish the path. We'll remove the stones as they keep heaving up. They become more of a hazard. Unfortunately, I know it's a nice look, but they definitely can be hazardous. We're planning on repurposing those stones. Those clay stone pavers like that, they're pretty good at reinforcing like the ball dugouts and stuff like that, because it prevents the wear of the material in there. So we're thinking of repurposing there. It helps save money purchasing that kind of thing. So it'll be a good use. It's been repurposed before. We'll repurpose it again. So part of it too, we were hoping, and I know it's been a long-standing project of maybe moving the cannon over to that entranceway. So it would be a nice new base for the cannon, and we can commemorate it with a plaque or what. But we're still working towards that, as it's been difficult to find any proper monument groups to actually assist with that. So
right.
It'll take some planning, but I think the plan is to have the sidewalk at least completed for now until we can go on and approach that.
And that will be completed like this summer?
Yeah, the sidewalk will be completed this summer. We discussed, Jeff and I were trying to tie it in with the sidewalk work. He can only do so much.
Okay, right.
So he's coming back in the fall, and I think we're hoping to get it done then.
Okay, perfect. Okay, thank you. Lisa, economic development. Nope. Nothing. That's weird. I don't think she's got any update. But maybe I will. I do know that her project with some businesses in decorating the Muskoka chairs, I believe they're being collected this week. And she had 12 businesses step up to decorate some Muskoka chairs that will be placed around the community. So, and I think, as I said, I think they're all being dropped off this week, so that community we can look forward to seeing those chairs in different spots, either through the park or through parks or Main Street, or I'm not sure what her plan is, but I know keep your eye out for that. I don't think there's anything else. If there is, oh, she's just texting me a report. So let me just read this. Oh, right, the scavenger hunt. Anybody that is on social media, and actually there was a story, I think about a month or so, 6 weeks ago, I think St. Thomas had a scavenger hunt, and Lisa was able to get in contact with the developers of that hunt. And anyways, it is a neat platform. It's an app, and you look for the Discover Lucan Biddulph scavenger hunt. All the details can be on social media. I believe it's going out in a newsletter, but it's a fun family activity to participate in so that you can discover Lucan Biddulph and all the great things that are in the community. And your name would be entered into winning a $100 gift certificate for a restaurant in our area. And she's working on a new video that will highlight our businesses, but instead of them asking us for their business, we're going to be thanking them for all the efforts. And it's going to be kind of a thank you for, being there in our community, and, support them, support local, that sort of thing. So look for that video to come in the next little bit. Okay, moving on. Councillor comments. Councillor Regan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I know with Lisa's mic being out, I was just going to ask, there was just two questions I had. One was about the, again, a resident has asked about the signs on either end of the town, what the progress is on that. And again, you don't need to answer right away. But the other one was, I did have a comment from a resident about the car wash, because they said to me, and I had noticed it, but they had said to me that construction had stopped, or it didn't seem like they were moving forward with it. So I wasn't sure. Yeah, so it didn't look like that to me, but I didn't know if there was any, maybe they're just really impatient, and the concern didn't come from the deputy mayor. So anyway, so I was just wondering if there's anything on that. And I don't need an answer to that, but I would like to ask Jeff a question, if I could, about the street sign campaign that we were we had mentioned that with the Inspector Croker. And I'm just wondering, I know we talked about this before, I brought it up a number of times. And I know we were just sort of waiting for some signage, or just sort of working through that. And I wonder if there's any progress on that, Jeff, if I could ask that.
Yeah, and through the mayor, we have a couple of examples of signs we put together, Julie and myself. We just got to get it, probably send it out for some comments to come back, and then once we have a more point to go forward with a sign, it's just a matter of going forward with the program. We can launch it with the help of Lisa and get it out in the community and just start educating. And I think they're popping out of all over. This isn't, obviously I've said before, this isn't new. There's different programs around that other municipalities have jumped on. So we want to tie it into the Lucan heritage. We'd like to make sure, I think that's as the water tower, as you can see in the background there, it's nice to have that logo and tie it into the community and feel part of it. So we've worked on a couple, and so I think in the short term you'll see maybe example. I'll try and send out some information to everybody and ask for comments to come back on a sign. So, right. And when Madam Mayor, there is lots of work going on in the car wash. they were pumping cement there on, I believe,
Okay.
Monday, yesterday. So it's going.
All right, thank you. Thanks, Jeff. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. And I think Paul was probably going to say the same thing.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I was just going to say, I think they were doing internal work. That's why it's not visible to the public, but we definitely see them moving around every day.
It's in a prime spot for you guys to see all the work that's happening, so that's good. And with regards to the signs and the painting, I know when we unveiled the Shamrock, and Murals and Metal were there for a picture. I know Lisa and the Murals and Metal guys were talking about it, and they are trying to figure out what to do. So they know about it, and okay.
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Lisa.
Any other councillor comments? Councillor Westman.
I just thought I would acknowledge for you, Madam Mayor, that this is the first day of Pride Month. And Lucan Biddulph has made a bold statement that we are an inclusive community and that, everyone here in our community is equal and welcomed and loved. And I just wanted to make sure that that was something that we put out there. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that, Councillor Westman. It's probably one of the things I'm most proud of that we did as a council. Any other councillor comments? I might just add that, and now I'm going to say the date, and Councillor Westman, I think, will know. The Granton Fire Department is having a pork chop dinner. I think it's June. Is it June 19th, Alex? Anyways, I know Lisa shared it on social media.
Let me just check my tickets. Yeah, it's the 19th.
The 19th. And you can get your tickets, pre-order your tickets through any member of the fire department. And if you don't know a member of the fire department, I'm going to volunteer Councillor Westman. You can contact Alex and he will be able to get you tickets to the drive-through pork chop dinner. Okay. Any other, sir? One last call for councillor comments. Okay, moving on then to no changes to budget, notices of motion. Okay, we do have the bylaw for the Blake addendum 41-2021. And the motion is that bylaw 41-2021 be given first and second reading. And of course, just a reminder that the third reading will be done at the appropriate time. So this is just the first and second reading. If I can get a mover and a seconder for that. Councillor Westman and Councillor Regan, all in favor? And that's carried. And let me just pull up. Okay, and that if no one cares to speak to these bylaws on their first, second, and third reading, that they be considered to have been read a first time and passed, read a second time and passed, read a third time and passed, and that they be numbered 42-2021, the execution of agreement for OMI for water services, and 43-2021, the confirming bylaw. Can I get a mover and a seconder for that, please? Deputy Mayor Manders and Councillor Westman, and all in favor, and that's carried. And resolved that the council meeting be adjourned at 8:38 p.m. A mover and a seconder for that, please. Councillor Regan and Deputy Mayor Manders,